Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're really excited to have with us Dr. Rahul Gupta. Welcome to the show, Rahul.
Thank you for having me, Zane. Appreciate it.
So, Dr. Rahul Gupta was the first physician to serve as America's drug czar, overseeing a $44 billion budget with a B and credited with saving 27,000 lives in a single year, which is just incredible. He's now at GATC Health using AI to invent new drugs in months instead of a decade, starting with one for the opioid crisis itself. So you coordinated a $44 billion federal budget. Why walk away from that to go build drugs with AI?
That's a great question, actually. I've thought about it myself before joining the new gig. And part of it's being a problem solver. So the reason I was hired into the White House was we were having a really big problem. And over
Yes.
100,000 people were slated to die in a single year, one American every 5 minutes around the clock. So it became my job to figure out how to coordinate this work in bureaucracy of 19 federal agencies with the money, but also to get effects and to save lives, which is the hardest thing to do, actually, if you think about it. So as we began that journey to start having at least 27, as you mentioned, saying 27,000 to 30,000 lives, understanding that these are every year and every life is worth, it's somebody's brother or somebody's spouse or a teacher, a student in community. It became even more important for me to think about, okay, how do I look at the next challenge? And I saw where this company was working using artificial intelligence to discover and predict the success of drugs, medications, which is so important because we're in an area now that not only medications are so far than what we call affordable or accessible to the average American as compared to the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
world, but they're beyond reach, but also for a lot of rare diseases, they just don't exist. For difficult diseases like opioid addiction, they really aren't have changed for the last several decades. So I wanted to be part of that solution.
So you grew up outside. I'm going to go back and do just a little bit of history. So you grew up outside DC, but made your name in West Virginia at the worst opioid crisis. What pulled you there?
Same problem. I mean, I went in cold with my family into Charleston, West Virginia, hired as a local health official. And as that local county commissioner, um, my job was to take care of all the public health for the largest county in the state. As I did that, addressing real problems for real people on the ground, it gave me the opportunity then for two successive governors to be asked to serve as the state health commissioner. So having a larger budget, larger employees, but also larger problems to transform the way public health is done. As a result of those things, we saw over 40% drops in overdose deaths in West Virginia, which sort of people started taking notice of. And that was one of the several problems we were trying to solve in West Virginia. And whenever you're working in really deep, complex problem-solving space and can get some success, it's sort of re-energizing, but also at the end of the day, you're saving lives, and that's important. And that's what pulled me into West Virginia and then onto the national stage.
So I think one of the biggest things that you got done was the naloxone. Naloxone. That's how I'm pronouncing it, but that doesn't look how it spells. Not. Can you want to? Why don't you straighten me out on that? But
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that drug was really
Yeah.
a key thing to get that. It actually ended up as an over the counter drug. Is that where you can get it without a prescription?
Yeah, Zane, one of the things that I try to do in whatever role I'm working in is to first diagnose the problem and then figure out what's the easiest solution or most lowest hanging fruit to be able to immediately have impact and then work on the longer term. Every problem pretty much has, immediate solution and part of it's midterm and long term. So one of the
Mhm.
parts I found was think about a battlefield where you're losing soldiers. And first thing when somebody gets wounded is to put a tourniquet on the bleeding, so you can then carry them back to base and put an IV, on them. And those are the things we have learned through battlefield history in medicine. We This naloxone, this medication, which is really the antidote for overdoses from opioids. It's also
Mhm.
one of the market names is Narcan, but I like to call it naloxone, which is the generic form. At the time, it was about $120 for 2-pack. It was hardly available as easy as you need it to be. So we, started a process where we brought it down to about $20 a 2-pack. We made it available over the counter and almost at no cost to most people across the United States, making sure that, whether it's tribes, whether it's desperate populations and others in schools and malls and transit systems, we're making it available like an, AED device, that stuff that hangs on the walls of
Right.
common places. If you have a heart attack, they can save your life, or a fire extinguisher, or a CO carbon monoxide alarm. That removes the stigma, makes it more available, and then voila, we start to see all these lives being saved because the utility of that medication, life-saving medication, goes up significantly amongst other actions.
So that was absolutely huge. I mean, the effect of that, and I'm looking here, 165,000 overdose deaths, and down to 80,000. I would think that naloxone, just in and of itself, was probably the greatest contributing factor to that kind of a sea change.
Zane, I think so, and a lot of the data is proving that. But I'll provide some context to the numbers you mentioned. When I walked into the White House my first day, they had a plan ready to go for me to sign and the president to sign. But my question was at the time is, okay, before we do anything, I really want to know where will we be if we continue to do the same things in about 4 years, which is end of December 2025. And if we put the might of every, not just government, but community and every policy where we can be. And the answer I got was if we continue on the same path, it's not doing nothing, but it's the same path. We're going to be at 165,000 deaths by the end of 2025. But we put every policy in place and put money behind it and help communities, we can half that to about 80,000 by end of 2020. So then we reworked our policy, the entire system. And I said, well, that's an easy answer then. We got to get to the 80,000 or below and begin that process. So think about it as a large ship in the ocean. You just can't turn it
Mm-hmm.
around. You need to slow it down, you need to move it, and then it gradually turns. But the important part is to start the process. And as we did, we saw that we got down to about 74,000 way before December 2025. So we were amongst probably the only government agency that can get you more lives saved below budget and before time.
Yeah, that was impressive. So now you're a biotech founder raising Series A. Where should they be using AI, and where is it still just hype?
Zane, that's a great question. So let me give you some context here for the what everyday American feels in terms of pain, not at the pump, but at their pharmacy. Um, the,
Mm-hmm.
it 90% of the drugs that ever are discovered actually fail trials at one stage or another and don't make it to the market. So those that do tend to become very expensive, almost unaffordable. That's one problem. The second is that for a lot of diseases, when we look at like multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, like amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, there are no treatments. There haven't been really good, effective treatments because some of the rare diseases, nobody wants to invest money in them because they may not be able to make as much money. So Now, our technology, which is completely working in silico, which is on AI platforms, and processing so much data in so little time, and actually creating algorithms which could pretty much, based on human data, run almost like clinical trials in virtual reality. We're able to do two big things. One is to discover new compounds. That is how we were able to discover a particular novel drug disorder or opioid addiction that has shown real promise in animal data, and we're moving forward for taking it to the human clinical trials. And secondly, we can take almost any molecule in the world that's been discovered, and we could tell you with over 90% certainty whether it's going to work or not work before companies put hundreds of millions of dollars and years, sometimes decades of effort in trying to make it work.
So that's an amazing claim. And I'm sure that it would seem like, how do you back up something like that? Because it almost sounds outrageous. On its face, I say, well, how the hell can that be?
Well, this was my question when I was, I was talking with the folks at the company, and I said, look, before I join, I really need to know if there's proof in the pudding. And what I saw, I'm a data person, so I look at numbers and go with the evidence. So there was a study, it's been validated, so to say, in a couple of ways, most important. There was a study that UC Irvine took almost 3,000 chemical, like drugs, molecules, some that were successful and some that were not. And we know the results of those, what happened. But they blinded them and then put them up through our sort of system at GATC Health.
Mm-hmm.
And what they were surprised and they found was over 92% specificity, meaning very high rate of being able to predict the system is of the molecule's ultimate success. Now, we've known the success beforehand, but we blinded that, and it could do a good job in predicting that success. Second, there's the largest insurer in the world is called Lloyd's of London. So one of the conglomerates of Lloyd's of London entered into an exclusive contract with GATC Health, and they said, well, here's what we can do. We want to create an insurance product in the market, which will provide debt insurance to any company that is going through the clinical trials for their molecules. So if you have a molecule, generally what happens is small and medium biotech, they may have some money in the bank, but if they've got 2 or 3 or 4 molecules, the first one, if it fails, can bankrupt the company. So a solution is if you can borrow money, and if you have a good molecule, and we know it works from prediction, and you can get insurance against that debt, then you got nothing to lose. And that insurance against debt wasn't possible unless you had an underwriter, a predictive model like this available. So Lloyd's conglomerate came to us and said, we want to enter into a contract with you. So now what we're doing is we're providing that important data to MCI to be able to help in one of those factors of making decisions to provide insurance against the debt companies take, so they can move forward and not have a high-risk proposition, and at the same time be able to prioritize their pipeline. So if they got 5 molecules, they can figure out which one should go first, not because someone likes it, but because it's got the largest or highest chance of being successful.
So what prevents another AI company coming in and competing against you? What sort of proprietary, I mean, obviously without disclosing your secret sauce, what sort of proprietary things are you guys doing that allows you to do what you're talking about, which seems like we're cutting ahead multiple years from where we are now? I mean, a decade ahead. I mean, this really seems very groundbreaking to me.
Yeah, so, creating this, what we call the FICO score of drug development, being able to look in the crystal ball of for the future and tell you results early on, as you mentioned, Zane. All of this comes through the work of really smart, sort of the original founders of the company. Our chief technology officer, who is a software engineer, has done a lot of this work prior in different sectors, as well as our chief science officer, who's worked on the Human Genome Project. And they came together to conceive of this idea. And with the technological breakthroughs that are available now, with those particular like thousands of what we call LLMs, as well as algorithms that are very specific, copyrighted, secretive, you could say almost, but they're able to get that work done and then taking a lot of that data, that's open source data, but also other data. And all of it's human data. That's the differentiator here. Because you can do a lot of work with animal data, but we know that animal data is just not a good proxy for human. So, every time something works in animals, it has very high likelihood of failure in human trials. And so we were thinking, why then have animal data? So we've created this particular sort of systems. We call the system called Operon, OPERON. That's a phase 3 or third generation AI platform to do this. And our predictive analysis reports called DRISC, DERISQ. So this DRISC report can tell you all about your molecule, no matter where and who has it. So we're able to do these things because of the technology and the advances that are there. And we believe that we're pretty much, leading this field in this way.
So if a company's phase 2 readout comes in badly, can AI actually save the asset, or is it just dead?
That's an amazing question, Zane. I will tell you, because here's what we do. This is real. So oftentimes, if we get the report and that asset doesn't work, that molecule just doesn't work for that disease, we used to leave that on a shelf somewhere, and it kind of goes into a failed trial category. That's not really true anymore, because we think every failed drug is a drug just waiting to be successful for some other disease. So what we are able to do is then run that asset against a multitude of other conditions and be able to see where it sets well with safety, with efficacy, and with off-target effects, and able to get you the answer literally right away, as opposed to never seeing it or waiting decades before somebody picks it up and realizes, well, I could have used this for this particular cancer instead of that cancer. Because at the end of the day, when you can do that, you can actually save more lives sooner. Because, ALS is a great example. It's a debilitating neurological disease, Lou Gehrig's disease. I've diagnosed and treated people with ALS. And the problem is they're not fighting against the system. They're fighting against time. There are a lot of people today, thousands of Americans, who are not going to make it because there's no treatment available. So this is for us a race against time.
So I think it's fascinating what you're talking about there, because there's so many drugs that have been discovered accidentally to do something other than what they were designed to do, but it's almost like, so you're basically turning an accidental discovery into intentional discoveries, is what you're talking about.
Exactly. You could plan it. You don't have to wait on the accidents to happen any longer, because now we can actually intentionally study that molecule against a variety of diseases at the same time, because of the way our algorithms are sort of made. So we can run, sort of billions and trillions of data points in a matter of minutes. So, and it's because of not just the platform, but also the way the algorithms are set up. So you can get that information very quickly, and we can model sort of the results very quickly. So that is kind of the key. And I think it's fascinating, because I do believe in the next less than decade, next very few years, we will have a revolution in the way we discover drugs, where we approach the approval of drugs, and the way we get drugs into human beings, it would become more accessible, more affordable, and we are going to see a revolutionary era. Now, we know this because National Institutes of Health, the Food and Drug Administration, and other federal agencies are also moving to try to adapt some of these techniques and methods as quickly as they can as well, including getting rid of animal testing. At least that process has begun.
So my question there is, I just, as you're talking about that, what kind of an impact do you think that AI will have on the approval process of drugs? Because I was in the medical device field for decades, and just to get drugs are much worse than medical devices, but just to get a medical device through was such a time-consuming, such an expensive process, and a drug is that times a multiple. Does this concept have an ability to maybe compress that, but do it safely?
Absolutely. Look, I think this is why we're such a very important inflection point in the history of the world when it comes to treatments and cures. Because, first of all, we've used this very old, long method, which is we go through animals after the discovery of a drug. Then we have to show the data. Then we go through this stage 1, 2, and all into humans. But there's an approval and regulatory process, like you mentioned, Zane. The challenge becomes we sacrifice tens of millions of animals every year without actually realizing that animal science does not very well translate into human physiology. And there's a reason for that. Because you can get any organ in animals like 1-to-1 reaction with a drug molecule. When you put that molecule in humans, which have much more complex systems, multi-organs, interactions within each other, you get high rates of failure. Now, we're at a stage with newer approach methodology, or NAMS as we call it, that we could really begin to phase out animals for most drug discovery and sort of trials to move forward. This is going to help a few ways. First, it will accelerate the timeline. It will get us also save a lot of cost and labor and money. And it will allow approval regulatory agencies to really consider artificial intelligence as one of the methodologies in looking at a drug. We still have to do human clinical trials. You can't bypass that. But it gets the molecule to the human clinical trial much faster. Now, in this space, I will say, FDA is doing some really good work because recently they have come out with guidelines along with the European FDA, EMA it's called, to provide some joint guidance on AI as how companies should think. So we're moving away from what I call PowerPoint science into actual data science for AI to develop those goalposts of how the validated, strong sort of systems of AI will develop in the future to be able to provide support to the regulatory frameworks where we can get these medications out there faster, safer, and hopefully more affordable.
So I have so many questions. I could stay on here for 2 hours with you, but I can't do that. But so if you're a biotech firm with like $10 million in the bank in one shot, how should AI fit into your development plan?
I think almost your way to survive is through AI. So what that means is if you have multiple assets in your pipeline, first you would want to prioritize those assets based on what AI tells you, which of those assets is most likely to succeed. And then you move that asset forward based on that. So AI helps guide that particular asset, first prioritize it and then guide it forward. It can help you not only have that predictive modeling, but also almost help you design clinical trial. So because there now FDA is allowing a single determinative clinical trial to get approval, part of that's going to be very important to have the right design in place. And the second phase here is now assisting with AI to design clinical trials that are more likely to have success in a way without compromising the safety or off-target effects.
So if a drug, this hypothetical drug company or biotech company comes up with something and they're thinking this is really going to be great, and how would the process? They say then they find out about GATC and they say we need to research this. How would that work? What would be the actual functional way that they would go about working with you to discover a new approach to their research?
Well, the first thing is just connect with us. So we're pretty much open to talking to folks, gatchealth.com. There's easy links to connect with us. And what will happen is an initial conversation. And I'll give you some examples with us. There's a publicly traded company that we enter into a relationship, and immediately they're sort of folks, the analysts on the street sort of said, we're going to give it a 10x, 15x rating for this stock. And they mentioned GATC Health as a part of that. And obviously, they've recently got bought out as a significant higher value because of the wonderful work and the adoption of AI that they're doing. So I think there's this side of this where public traded companies in biotech sphere are struggling, honestly speaking. I mean, they've been under a struggle for the last 5-7 years, where oftentimes
30 years.
Yeah, I would say I was trying to be nice about it, but the bank balance is more than your sort of stock valuation. And one way to get about that and move it forward is this type of approach. And the second example would be that we've had a situation where the FDA said, well, this molecule has some rash, so you need to do biopsies and other things, but it does allow AI evaluation. So they came to us. We were able to determine that the rash was because of histamine release, like a regular, just basic allergic reaction. And for those people who have it, you can just give something like Benadryl. And they've submitted data with that. So there's all kinds of support that artificial intelligence and companies like GATC Health can provide in actually developing those partnerships and helping the success of the biotech or industry move forward faster in a way that's responsible, safe, but also solving a really difficult problem in a timely manner.
So if somebody is a pharmacy company or biotech company is thinking, this sounds really interesting, but we're super busy. I can't possibly imagine doing another damn thing. How difficult, I mean, how much, because it's how much resources are involved, I mean, in terms of time to implement something like this?
Not at all. I mean, here's what I say. If folks, we all are busy, if they're busy doing something which there's a lot of uncertainty, and we know this historically, there's so much uncertainty in the results, in the ultimate approvals with the FDA and others, and you could cut down that uncertainty to a reasonable level, then that's a prioritization sort of effort here. Because what we're saying is it's not another thing for your company. It's actually the very thing that will decide the success or failure ultimately of the company for you. And helping support that is both something important, but also it literally is the difference between this industry surviving or not. Is how much can you prioritize your assets, and with what certainty can you invest in them moving forward? And the last thing I would also say is when you do this de-risk approach, where you can literally go through a process and get a report that has, sometimes it's got 40 pages, sometimes more, and it rates every aspect of safety, efficacy, off-target effects, what's good, what's not good in a way. You can actually go to your board. You can go to your investors and say, we have a guarantee that this asset will work with 90% certainty. So when that happens, is that also helps with fundraising. That helps increasing the belief of the investors and sort of valuation of into that asset. because now you have a third-party validation for that aspect.
So walk me through what happens when a pharma partner hands GATC a molecule. What does your team do in the first 8 minutes?
Good question. So different things, but I'll start with the one thing that we definitely do in the terms of de-risking it. So the first thing we would do is take all of the data of that particular molecule, and we will take it and run it through our algorithms, and we begin that process. It takes us a little bit more than 8 minutes to get a report, which we take about 3 weeks, which is compared to the years and years it takes to find out, and hundreds of millions of dollars. So we get an agreement, we put the molecule into our algorithms, we run it through, as I mentioned, for various aspects. It's literally a clinical trial, if you think about it, to see where it would go. And then we provide this comprehensive report back to the company within 3 weeks to be able for them to make a decision on it. And sometimes if it looks like it's not going to work on this, then we start to develop a relationship with them on how best to use that asset for other things and evaluate that. That's one stream of work. The other is we, of course, work with those who are working to develop molecules. So, for example, for the opioid addiction, we narrowed down about 80 targets in the brain to 3 targets in the prefrontal cortex of your brain. We asked AI to evaluate for us a target for each one of those 3 sites in the brain. We ran trials in silico for each one of those. Then we combined those 3 assets into one. Now we call that right now compound 1021. And with that compound 1021, once we were comfortable that this is the one, that's it, not 1022 or 1065, then we went into a CGMP, a lab, and we created the molecule itself. And then we tested the molecule on mice. We didn't have to, but we did it just because that's just the norm these days as we phase out. And we published that study in the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences recently that shows the sort of brilliant positive impacts of this molecule on the mice suffering from addiction.
So you're talking about, let me simplify this. I'm a simple man. You're talking about a condition, just to make sure I understand it, you're talking about, here's this condition, and we're going to use AI to look at what kind of molecule that we can develop. Did I summarize that correctly?
That's exactly. And
so, because go ahead. So
no, I was going to say it's fiction coming to real life. That's how I thought about it when I heard about it and I started to join the company. Yeah, science fiction.
So it's then it becomes an infinite possibility. When I think about that, then I think about IBM and their supercomputer, or the amount of processing power to take. So you're talking about it. When I did the research, it says your platform analyzes 400 trillion data points. What are those data points in plain English?
Yes. So think about you, Zane, and all of your multiomics, like your genetics, your transcriptomics, your metabolomics, all of your data sets in your body now being projected onto a computer, simply put. So all of that, we can create the sort of you on a computer, and we can run trials on you on a computer. Just that's a very simplified version of it. And the difference between like IBM's or NVIDIA or others is it's not the chips, it's not the computing power, but it's also the ability of those specific algorithms to run in conjunction. So, for example, that back to that 8-minute theory, on that molecule we will get, on one side we will run it for safety, simultaneously we will run it for efficacy, and then at the same time we'll run it for off-target effects. So off-target effects means like, is it going to surprise us basically and do something else?
Mm-hmm.
And we can do all this simultaneously because of those algorithms. And that's why how we get that 400 trillion data points and work that in 8 minutes, basically. So that's what speeds up. That's the
it just sounds
the spike, the secret sauce of the platform.
so. Unfortunately, we got a little bit of a late start today from another technical reasons, and so I'm going to have to cut this shorter than I would really like to because I have so many other questions because I think this topic is just very fascinating. I just really want to thank you for coming on the show, Rahul. I think you added a lot here. It was really interesting, and your organization GATC Health, I'm sure is going to be, I mean, beyond super successful, changing medical science completely as we know it. From what you've told me here, it's just remarkable.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us again. I'm very excited because the platform is agnostic to disease conditions, and we're really, I feel personally, but also the company feels very just, so fortunate to be in this environment where we have AI. We have a lot of appreciation for the work that moving forward and really helping transform the industry. So thank you for having me on your program.
So if you want to know more about GATC or get in touch with them, there's going to be information in the show notes here. So